Well, hello. It's a pleasure to welcome you today to this very special Kazakhstan-focused webinar titled Tax Cameral Control in Kazakhstan, What is New in 2024 with Ravil Kassilgov. Two housekeeping items. Choose the language, whether it's Russian or English, with the icon at the base of your Zoom screen. It looks like a little globe there in most cases. The webinar will be video recorded in both Russian and English and available on the website for BKS members after the event. This webinar addresses actually very important possible changes to taxation documentation for individuals and companies in Kazakhstan. So it's an important subject for you. The moderator today is Stephanie Balsys. Stephanie specializes in dispute resolution and advises on complex commercial cases, acting for corporations and high net worth individuals. She has extensive experience in the CIS countries, is a partner at Mishcon Reya, and a chair of the British-Kazakh Society Law Group. Over to you, Stephanie.
David, many thanks. And on behalf of the British-Kazakh Society Law Group, welcome everyone. As we all know, a competitive fiscal climate and taxation regime are key priorities for any state hoping to drive and maintain economic growth and stability and stimulate investment. We are absolutely delighted today to have Ravil Kassilgov to talk to us about important developments in the Kazakh Cameral control regime, as David has explained. As many of you will know, Ravil is a partner at Tukulov, Kassilgov, Shaikenov disputes, based in Almaty. He represents the interests of companies in the courts at all levels, primarily in tax disputes, as well as in international arbitrations and the AIFC court. Throughout his career, Ravil has worked closely with international law firms, and many of you will know him well, and know that he has also acted as a Kazakh law expert in arbitrations in London. So, Ravil, please tell us, tax cameral control, what's new?
David, Stephanie, большое спасибо за представление.
David, Stephanie, thank you so much for introducing myself. So let's start our webinar, which focuses on tax desk audit in Kazakhstan, which is quite a specific topic. Hopefully this will be useful and helpful to those people who work with tax desk audits, professionals such as accountants, auditors, etc. In 2024, a lot of important changes have taken place in tax desk audit. I'll go briefly through the history of this issue, what happened in 22, 23, and then in 24. Hopefully that will help you to understand what has changed. So let's start with desk control in 2023. Back then, for high degree risk violations, a desk audit notification was sent, and if a taxpayer did not or did agree with that notification, then he had or they had to provide certain documentation. And if that documentation did not meet the requirements then of the tax authorities, then the tax authorities issued a decision saying that this notification was not enforced. Then notifications started to be categorized as violations with a high risk and medium risk. In 2023, the enforcement procedure did not change. You were given 30 days Also, if taxpayer agrees, they were included into this tax registration, or they had to refund VAT, etc. In the event of disagreement, the procedure for the taxpayer changed. Talking about the medium risk violations in 23, in order to enforce the explanation for the notification, you had to enclose several alternative documents. Those could be tax or accounting registers. Those could be documents confirming the accuracy of data in your tax statements. So if we look at the law itself, and you will see on my screen that the taxpayer was given quite a lot of freedom as to what documents to provide. You may also know, in practice, tax authorities always considered this provision as a provision that obligates the taxpayer to provide all documents, registers and documents confirming data accuracy. This led to a high number of disputes. That was quite an unfortunate amendment that took place in 2023, and in 2024, the desk audit procedure changed. As for the high risk violations, documents were to be enclosed to this explanation, and in both cases, for notifications, for high and medium risk notifications, in the event of incorrect enforcement, the tax authorities issued a decision saying that this notification of theirs was not enforced. Notifications in the first quarter of 2023 led to these new rules about categorization of violations. However, new forms of notifications were approved on the 1st of April of 2023. Over the first 3 months of 2023, notifications were issued under the old format, and our client, who is registered at AIFC, received quite a lot of notifications, leading to some serious implications and consequences. So we paid attention to the following. Notifications did not specify what kind of risks there were, and so we used this argument to appeal the notifications, and the administrative court of Astana supported us. They said that the notification did not specify the degree of the risk, and they said that any administrative act needs to be justified because the taxpayer themselves are not supposed to guess as to what to do. And so the court revoked this. The appeal procedure at the court is quite a protracted procedure. It takes sometimes more than half a year. And so if you find yourself in a similar situation, you can submit an appeal, and this can be used as an additional instrument of strengthening opposition. Let's move on to 2024. The procedure for enforcement did not change. However, serious changes took place in the procedure of non-agreement for medium risk violations. You are to provide explanations, but you as the taxpayer are not obligated to enclose any documents. This is completely new rule, so you can provide your explanation without any documents, and the notification should be considered as automatically enforced. Now, that's the way the tax authorities treat and interpret such situations. From the point of view of regulation, it's not quite clear whether this can be considered as automatically enforced or not. As for high risk violations in 2024, you need to enclose some confirming documents to your notification explanation. Also, quite serious changes were made to this non-enforcement. So for such notifications, the taxpayer basically doesn't know whether their notification was enforced, was executed or not. In this connection, we will recommend to businesses the following. After the execution of notification, you need to require in written form to the tax authorities, ask them to provide you with formal documentation confirming whether they recognize this as enforced or not. The tax authorities will just issue a short note saying we are in receipt of your documents, but the tax authorities now should provide their confirmation. Because if we do not know whether our notification was executed or enforced properly, we will not know whether this enforcement or non-enforcement can be used by them during tax audits. If there is no reaction at all from the taxpayer, then after the expiry of 30 days, all expense transactions will be suspended. In such a situation, if a company finds itself in such a situation, then when they provide explanations, the suspension can be revoked. For high risk violations, the situation is completely different this year. Tax authorities can recognize the notification as non-enforced or non-executed if the explanation is not in line with the tax code, and if the tax authorities do not agree with the circumstances set out in your explanation. So if you receive a high risk notification for non-commodity transactions, and so the tax authorities maybe think that such transaction did not take place, if they think so, you are to provide your explanation. You need to explain your position, enclose all the necessary documents, but now they have the right not to agree. And they will issue a decision saying that this notification was not enforced. After such decision is issued, if we look at the law, we will see that digital invoices you will not be able to issue any digital invoices. For a business, this is basically a situation whereby they will not be able to issue any invoices at all or receive any invoices digitally, electronically. Such
ведет к тому, что, конечно, такие уведомления нужно
notifications need to be worked on properly. So if you do not agree with such notification, then you need to provide your explanation, and then maybe even you can appeal against such notification. But if you have to enforce or execute that notification after receiving this decision, then you need to appeal this decision. A decision about recognition of tax audits as executed non-enforced are sorry guys, are issued within 5 days. This is done only once every year. Sorry.
Многократно. Да. Да. Хорошо, хорошо. Хорошо.
I have asked Ravil to slow down because it's so technical. So such decision is issued only once, and it is issued only for notifications, high degree risk notifications. After these amendments came into force and effect, a semi-formal release was issued by the Administrative Court of Astana, and the judge said that when making decisions on high-risk notifications, a hearing procedure needs to take place. So the taxpayer needs to receive a preliminary decision first, then they will be able to provide their objections to that preliminary decision and provide additional documents. That way, they also, the taxpayer, as part of this hearing procedure, have the right to provide their suggestions and proposals about the hearing protocol. And since this administrative procedure, which is quite regulated, strictly regulated, any violation can be used further to submit an appeal. Before 2024, this procedure was not conducted, and courts didn't consider this to be obligatory or mandatory, but now the situation will change, which is good for the taxpayer. Good news for the taxpayer. There are cases still when explanations in response to notifications cannot be provided. There are 3 cases like that. Case number 1, corporate income tax and VAT.
Органа. 11 слайд, 11. Да, хорошо. Скажите, когда можно продолжать, и мы продолжим. Хорошо. Так вот, у нас есть 3 случая,
So
когда
we have 3 cases when we do not have the right to provide explanations. Case number 1 is for transactions without any services actually provided. Those are those transactions whereby there is a court decision against your supplier or a court ruling or a ruling issued by other relevant state agencies. So basically those are false invoices. Second case relates to corporate income tax, whereby
выясняется, что да, пункт 2. Пункт 2. Мы говорим про... Да, да. Хорошо, хорошо.
So, limitation of the right to submission of explanation. Point 2, when deducting expenses when calculating corporate income tax on transactions made without actual execution with a taxpayer whose director or founder was not involved in the activities of such a legal entity. Case 3, when offsetting the amount of VAT on transactions with persons whose registration was declared invalid. For cases 2 and 3, the taxpayer has the right to appeal and to prove the actual execution of transactions. And our practice shows that this actually can be done. Not all cases whereby your supplier is a dishonest person. So if you are confident that the transaction actually took place and you have all confirming documentation, maybe you have to lodge an appeal. We have already talked about certain implications of failure to fulfill the notification. Those are appointment of thematic audit, restriction of issuing electronic invoices, suspension of debit transactions on bank accounts. But there is also another implication which not many people pay attention to, and it can be quite critical. Desk audit impacts the degree of risk for your company. And so if desk audit notifications are not executed and you were classified as a high risk company, this will lead to certain implications. This slide shows you a standard set of implications or consequences. Those are no right to participate in horizontal monitoring, no right to extend the deadline for submitting tax reports and statements, significant reduction of the period for blocking bank accounts upon receipt of notification of the need to repay tax debts, a suspension of cash transactions in case of non-payment of tax debts, issuing a collection order for the forced collection of money from bank accounts, imposing restrictions on the disposal of property in case of non-payment of tax debts. And then a high risk situation can lead to you being included into the audit, tax audit schedule for the upcoming 6 months. There are other implications and serious consequences of which not many companies are aware. High risk also will prevent you to take part in certain competitions, especially if it's a subsole user and you are involved in extraction of solid minerals. Then with this high risk, you will not be able to take part in such tenders or competitions. We do have several examples: Eurasian Resources Group, Cathchrome, joint stock company, etc., etc. So also this situation will prevent you from submitting applications for concluding agreements aimed at industrial development. Again, high risk. You will not be able, if you are classified as a high risk taxpayer, you won't be able to take part in these tenders. And a question arises: can you appeal against being classified as a high degree of risk taxpayer? This is not a very promising sort of activity, so to speak. As a rule, Kazakhstani courts think that a high degree, if you're classified as a high risk taxpayer, this is not a huge problem. And if you're classified as a high risk taxpayer, then this all usually happens automatically without the human factor. And if courts review such cases, then they make the following conclusion: this is done automatically and legally. I am not going to talk too much about judicial practice. In my previous slides, I mean, judicial practice is set out in my further slides, and you will also be able to access more information, detailed information about judicial practice in our handout. Also, several factors needs to be mentioned that impact the desk audit this year. As you know, small business audits moratorium is now lifted. And so audits and inspections can be initiated now if you are a small business. And secondly, starting from 2024, the State Revenue Committee has the right, together with the National Bank, to monitor money movements and other fulfillment of obligations under foreign exchange or foreign currency agreements. Now the committee has online access to all foreign currency transactions, and desk audit notifications that taxpayers receive they will now receive them even more often. So the National Bank and the State Revenue Committee now have direct access to such transactions in order to be able to react to any violations quicker. And factor number 3 is suspension of filing of claims to tax authorities about challenging transactions. we have a letter from the Tax Administration Department of the State Revenue Committee to the tax authorities, and they say in that letter that in connection with the public outcry, and we do have such an outcry because the business community are not happy regarding the claims and claims to invalidate transactions, a decision was made to shift the emphasis from civil proceedings to tax audits. So if we compare the number of contested transactions, I mean, if we look at the number of such transactions that took place over the past 3 years, so if such number goes down, actually the number of audits will go up. So it was enough to go. Sorry, guys, I'm sorry.
Тоже будет исключена. Да, хорошо, если что, вы можете вот...
I'm sorry, guys, this is so unbelievably technical. I'm struggling. So the number of tax audits will increase because the tax authorities will file less claims on contested transactions. So tax audits will be held through desk audits for transactions, non-commodity transactions. Talking about appealing against these desk audit decisions, we need to understand the following. So when do we need to actually appeal against our desk audit? Why do we need to do that? We already know that sometimes you are not able to provide explanations. And if a transaction did take place, but they say that it didn't take place, you have the right to appeal in order to prove that this transaction actually is valid and it did take place. Number two, tactically, when you receive a tax audit notification that leads to significant risks for you, you can appeal against it as an administrative fact. You will do that in order to do the following. So if this notification is revoked successfully, the tax period will not be extended and the limitation period will not be extended. So the tax authorities will not be able to actually conduct a tax audit. We have had many grounds to appeal. In 2023, all tax audits in the country were signed electronically by one person from the State Revenue Committee. They used their digital signature, and so it was proven that this was illegal. And so also there were cases when desk audits was signed by someone who were on sick leave, and so such notifications were cancelled or revoked. To appeal a decision, we have only 10 working days in order to actually lodge our appeal against our desk audit notification. And these 10 working days are given for all types of appeals. So one appeal can suspend this, but to receive a decision, you will have less time, depending on when you lodged your first appeal. So these 10 working days should be preserved, and you need to make sure that they are not over. Another procedural feature. Sorry, guys. So to appeal decisions and notifications, when appealing notifications and decisions, they that are that way suspended in accordance with the provisions of the tax code and administrative code. In the administrative code, we have Article 137. It consists of literally 6 words, and it says
уведомление о результатах проверки,
that when filing a complaint against a notice of elimination of violations identified by tax authorities based on the results of desk control to the court, the period for execution of the notice of elimination of violations identified by tax authorities based on the result of desk audit is suspended from the date the court accepts the complaint for proceedings until entry into force of a judicial act. So you will have to just enclose your claim and the confirmation of the fact that it was actually lodged, submitted. When planning any actions relating to appealing against any desk audits, you need to take into account the following. If you go to court, first instance, your case will be reviewed for 3 months. This period can be extended for another 3 months. When a decision is finalized, that takes from 10 working days up to 1 month. Appealing against an appeal, 2 months. Review of an appeal, 3 months. Lodging an appeal to the Cassation Court, 1 month, which is quite a short period. But if you go to the Supreme Court, that will take longer because all complaints, absolutely all complaints that can be formally lodged with the Supreme Court are indeed reviewed by the court, and that's why it takes them up to 6 months. So in total, before a decision is enters into force and effect, you will need 1 year. Given the changes that took, amendments that were made to the desk audit, the practice that we have accumulated over the recent years will be relevant and can be used. We have several types of disputes. I'm not going to talk about them in detail, but there are several groups of disputes. Number 1, appeal against desk audit notification. There are quite a lot of successful precedents that you can use. Another group of disputes is appealing against the decision on desk audit. Such decisions do not contain sufficient grounds, and that's why they're quite often overturned. And then there is a separate group of disputes, the so-called formal features disputes. Based on the experience that we have accumulated and based on those amendments that have been made in 2024, we can present to you 8 recommendations. I'll go very briefly through them and then I'll start taking your questions. Number 1, you need to monitor the taxpayer cabinet, as we call it, or account, including email newsletters, functionality, etc. Also, you need to plan ahead all your tax statements and reports. additional tax statements will impact your degree of risk, you will receive a notification. So all that impacts the degree of your risk. Number 3, you need to determine the status of the notification, desk audit notification. You need to understand whether you can submit explanations or not. If you cannot, then you need to be able to see whether you will be able to prove the transaction. So there are a lot of nuances. Number 4, you need to enclose all documents to your notification properly. Medium risk situations, for them, you're not required to provide absolutely all documents, but we still recommend that you provide all explanations. Why? Because tomorrow, if your reaction to this desk audit notification will be used by them in order to initiate an audit, you will need to explain to them why you didn't justify your position. Number 5, you need to make a decision, strategically or tactically. Perhaps you need to lodge an appeal against your desk audit decision and maybe against the desk audit itself. Number 6, with tax authorities, you need to communicate formally and officially. So if you are going to provide any documents, you need to have written proof and evidence, because quite often tax authorities call you and ask you to send them documents via WhatsApp or via email, and then for you to be able to prove that all these documents are included into your case properly can be quite challenging. That's why we need to provide all our documents through their chancellery office or electronically. As I have said, to submit appeals for suspension, you need to file formally an application, because otherwise the tax authorities will not know that you filed such a complaint. Also, you need to verify all your counterparties. You should have a proper procedure in your company for that, because dishonest counterparties, if you do not verify everything, whether they have the authorized capital, resources, goods that you're going to buy, etc., all that should be in place. Stephanie, colleagues, I am ready to answer your questions now and questions from participants.
Ravil, thank you so very much for that. There was a huge amount of technical information and expertise that you shared, and will be absolutely invaluable, I'm certain, to those of us listening. Thank you also for the very useful and clear practical recommendations. I hope that anyone who has questions about practice and this area will either ask questions of you now, which we can share with you, or we'll contact you separately. It's been invaluable, and we're very grateful for your time. Thank you. I must say a huge thank you to our interpreters as well, because it is a very technical area and they have done a sterling job. So thank you. May I open questions to the floor? If anyone has any questions for Ravil, please send them through in either English or Russian, and I will put them to Ravil. We've had a few in already. Okay, Ravil, let me start. Let me start with this one. What would be your primary recommendation for businesses to help them prevent complications arising from desk audits?
Я понял. Ну, учитывая, что
Yes, I understand. Well, given the fact that these amendments and changes basically we're focusing on high risk transactions, non-commodity transactions. My main recommendation will be the following. You need to verify properly your counterparties. You shouldn't be working with anyone who provides goods or services. I mean, if you're not sure that they are actually honest, good faith, so to speak, suppliers, because they need to provide confirmation of origin of their goods, etc., etc. So if you do not do that, if you do not verify, then you run the risk of not just losing refunds on these expenses, but if something is, if they find something during a tax audit, I mean, you can multiply these implications by 3, by a factor of 3, because you will be penalized, and sometimes if you are not sure you are dealing with a proper supplier, you need to immediately decide that you won't be including your expenses into refunds. Sorry, guys. I'm so sorry.
Understood. Thank you, Ravil. Thank you. And keeping with the topic of high risk level cases, in cases where there are notifications with a high risk level and the tax authority is entitled to disagree with the explanations provided and to issue a decision, how can we appeal against such a decision most strongly or most effectively?
Я понимаю.
Yes, I understand. That's a great question. Yes, say the tax authority have this right to disagree, so to speak, with your explanation or explanations. Nevertheless, the norms, as we say, of the provisions of the administrative procedural code contain requirements for administrative acts. They need to be justified, and they need to be easy to understand, and they need to ensure the conformity. So any decision on desk audit notification, any disagreement needs to be justified in their decision properly. But very often we receive a decision where they have just this reference to article such and such of the tax code, and they do not provide any explanation as to why they actually issued this decision. So procedurally speaking, I'm sure there will be lots of grounds for us to dispute such decisions. We just need to carefully read them and then, act accordingly.
That's all clear and makes sense. Thank you, Ravil. And one final question that we have here. Is a pretrial appeal against desk audit notifications and decisions mandatory?
Да. Так, если говорить о камеральных уведомлениях, то
talking about desk audit notifications, the pretrial appeal is actually mandatory, obligatory. But as for decisions on desk audit notification, you can actually lodge your complaint with the court directly. But we still recommend to go through this pretrial procedure in any event, because number one, you will, I mean, the State Revenue Committee, quite often they overturn such decisions. And then also during the pre-court procedure, the tax authority, you will be able to identify certain violations committed by the tax authorities. And so you can take advantage of the situation.
Very interesting.
Ravil, could you just drop your slide so we can see you in the answers here, please? There we go. That's better. Thank you.
Ravil, thank you. If anyone else has any questions, please do send them in now. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss, Ravil? If not, unless we have another question soon, I will hand over to David to wrap up.
Okay, if there's no more questions incoming there, Stephanie?
No more questions.
Okay.
So, David, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to obviously thank everyone, Ravil and Stephanie, for a very detailed discussion on these issues, and also thank the two people you haven't seen here, Alijan pulling the strings behind the webinar in Astana, and Aida interpreting a very complex subject. She, if I may say, she earned her pay today. So, if I can just mention briefly future British-Kazakh Society near future events. Tomorrow, we have a very special in-person event in London on trade and investment with Ambassador Magjan Ilyasov, and a great panel, and also hosted by Field Fisher at their very nice offices in the city. In April, we'll have a webinar on the role of water in the mining industry. And in May, 2 education webinars hosted by David Hardy. One will be schools in Kazakhstan to universities in the UK, and the other one is on chevening scholars, their experiences. So with that, I encourage you to look at the website, support the society, especially through membership. We look forward to seeing you at the next events. Thank you so much. Keep safe. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone.
До свидания. Спасибо.
That's
Thank you. Goodbye.